And just noticing what's alive in your body in this moment. Noticing what's alive in the space around you. Mm. And just opening a ceremonial space within and around yourself, your own ceremonial space, and just notice how that arises for you intuitively. What does that feel like for you? And as you kind of open this ceremonial space, noticing if there are any particular energies in this space. Maybe there are images or symbols, maybe there are just colors or textures, sensations, just kind of noticing what is present within your ceremonial space, dropping into your body, dropping into your womb. I'm just beginning to take some deep breaths into the back, into the ribs. And as you exhale, just really intentionally exhaling, releasing any energies that just are not yours, anything that's not yours, just inviting it to be released, to just release from your field, from your body, not needing to know what it is. Anything you're carrying, maybe from people you have been spending time with, things you have been thinking of. Knowing that we can always return to this energy if it's of service to us. But for right now, just releasing, intentionally releasing any energies that really are not our own. Entering this ceremony in our own body, in our own energy. This is a space for you. I'm just noticing if there's any sound, any movement that wants to come out, just inviting. Oh, this is a space just for you. This is your ceremonial space for your body, for your womb, your energy. And now focusing on the inhalation, that slow, soft inhalation. And as you are breathing in, calling all of your energy back to you now. All of your energy, whomever it might be with, wherever it might be, you don't need to know any energies that you might have in other spaces with other people, recalling that energy, reclaiming that energy back into your field. You don't need to know. And just kind of imagining that energy returning into your field, into your body. Maybe you notice a particular part of your body or a particular part of your energy field that is kind of strengthened or filled with this returning energy. Maybe you don't notice it. It doesn't matter. Just observing what comes up for you. Right now, you are holding yourself, you are holding your own body, your own energy. There's nothing you need to hold for anyone else in this moment. There's nowhere else you need to be. And if it feels right to just hold the body here, maybe place the hands on the throat, on the chest, on the womb, just noticing how you want to hold yourself. Be here, be present for yourself, for your body. Mm. Mm, mm, mm. Mm, mm, mm. And noticing if there's any part of you that is resisting this space, that is maybe caught up in other thoughts, maybe still holding a little tension, a little anxiety, or restlessness, and just noticing where you can feel that in the body, and just seeing if you can just soften into that feeling, not force it, just kind of hold it, allow it to be where it is, and just affirm to it that you are here, that you are holding it, that it is fully supported. Everything that is alive in you in this moment is welcome and is held. And there is no right way to be. And just feeling that element of fire that you've called into your space, whether through a candle, whether through sage or palo santo or incense. Maybe you can just visualize this element and just connecting to this element in your space, feeling warmed by the presence of the fire, feeling held. And anything in the space that is not for you to hold, that is not for you in this moment, that is not of service to the ceremony, we're just letting go. And we're allowing and asking the fire to support, knowing you can always return to it, you can always pick it back up later. We're just going to start to drop the awareness into the womb space. Just notice what it feels like to enter into your womb space. Notice how she greets you. You can ask her, "How are you feeling?" And just notice how she responds. Mm. And opening up a ceremonial space within the womb, calling upon the element of fire within the womb, and just noticing how you experience this. Mm. Calling upon the element of fire within the womb. Feeling that warmth, that vitality within your womb space. Lighting that candle within your womb space. That eternal flame within your womb space. Calling upon the element of air. Calling upon the wind of your womb space. And just feeling that element arise, noticing how you intuitively experience this element within your womb space. Feeling the clarity, the inspiration within your womb. And just allowing the wind to circulate through the womb space. Awakening the air element within the womb space. Calling upon the waters of your womb, calling upon the element of water within the womb. Really inviting in the texture, the sensation of the water, and notice how you intuitively experience this. Attuning to the waters of the womb. The emotion, the intuition, reflection. Mm. And just feeling the womb nourished by the water, cleansed by the water. And calling upon the element of earth. And noticing how you experience that element within your womb space. Feeling that deep groundedness, stability, strength, stillness. Feeling your womb grounded into the earth herself. And honoring the fire, honoring the air, honoring the water, honoring the earth. And noticing if there's any one of these elements that seems to hold a particular medicine for you in this moment. Maybe all of them do, maybe some of them do, maybe just one of them does, but just noticing if any of these elements hold a particular medicine for you in this moment. Nothing you need to understand. Just feel and receive and acknowledge. Hmm. And just opening this space, the sacred ceremonial space within yourself, and opening this collective space, this collective ceremonial space that we share. We honor the earth. We give thanks to the earth for holding us. We honor the earth grid on which we are living, on which we are connecting from. We honor the ancestors of the lands. We honor the spirits of the land. Calling upon our healed ancestors. We invite our healed lineage into the space to hold us, to support us. To strengthen us. Calling upon those wise women, those healed womb bearers within our lineage, to hold us, to remind us. We call forth the sacred presence of our own bodies, of our own flesh and blood, of our own wombs. And we call upon the great mother womb of all life, she who holds us all, she from which we are birthed, and she to whom we will return. And we honor her. And we give thanks. And we acknowledge our own womb space as a sacred holographic reflection of the great mother womb, of the womb of life. Mikiaseo sutash tiaser kiasanti titarumash tisikeo sasarash. Miasao sukukuarashi sentiaras tieshur. Miarari shikaus konusuteo shasikiara yasintri tiaseo sanash. Miarari shisao konukiseri shisaru kutuaser. And so it is. And if it feels right, you can slowly open your eyes and return into the space you are in. Look around you. And just ground the ceremonial space you have opened into the physical space that you are in. And allowing those two spaces to merge. Mm. And I want to open a space for sharing without any particular prompt or invitation, just really inviting you to remain rooted in this space that you have opened within yourself, in this space that we are sharing in your womb. And just notice what is alive for you, whatever it is, what is on your heart, what feels present, and knowing there's no rush to this and there's no right or wrong way to do it. Whether it's something you want to share that has been alive in your journey the past 2 months, something that's alive for you right now, something that is opened for you that you wish to share and speak to and acknowledge and be seen in, or whether it's something that just suddenly is maybe present in your heart right now that maybe you don't even fully understand that you want to speak to. But just opening a space for your own voice and expression to weave into this moment, into this ceremony. And taking your time and just noticing what wants to come through.
Just gonna share something. Just want to say I've been very deeply, I've created such a deeper relationship with my body now because of all of this. And I realized how much though with that, how much I like abuse it, you know. So I have had like a little bit of this weird guilt and shame come up before this ceremony. I don't know what it was. I guess like I had fear last night and I I don't know. My body takes a lot from me. And, you know, finally taking the time to really go towards my body right now. I've been meditating a lot. But for some reason, this one I could really feel just everything. And my womb is so kind to me. It's just telling me like it's okay and that she loves me. But I guess I just have a little bit of guilt and shame still just very much present in my body relating to just, I guess it comes from the disconnection I've had for so long with my womb space. And I guess I just wanted to talk about that. I guess, it doesn't really make sense. I don't really know what my point is. I guess I'm just very grateful though that I'm able to finally have this space where she's always so forgiving. But I really just want to be a better person. I really want to be better for her. And I really can't wait for our relationship to grow. And it's really incredible. I think that's it.
Thank you so much for bringing that into the space. It's actually a thread that's really alive for me right now. Shame and guilt, that that particular dynamic between those two experiences, which are similar but yet have their own little flavor, each of them. And it's funny what you share about some of these things coming up for you last night, because I was actually awake for several hours last night with the most intense, I don't even know the word for it. It was like, I guess, a deep fear and a deep, hmm, yeah, a fear with that thread of guilt, the way guilt makes us afraid, the way shame makes us afraid. And when I was like leaning into my body and kind of going through the somatic practice that I usually will go through when that comes up, I couldn't find it in my body, which was really interesting. And typically I can identify these sensations in my body, and I couldn't find it in my body. And it seemed to be like just somewhere else close to me, but not inside of me. And that was really interesting. And I'm not totally sure what that was about. If it was a really intense collective thing that was just like super alive, that I was holding some thread to, and so it came up for me. Um, yeah, guilt and shame are they're such incredible teachers, because it's a really, for me, it's one of the most challenging sensations to hold. Right? It's not just anger or fear or even grief. It's so deeply related to how we perceive ourselves and the love that we're allowed to have. And so feeling it in and of itself can like put us into this place where we completely deprive ourselves of love just in acknowledging the shame and the guilt. And shame and guilt are a huge theme in my life. And a lot of that I understand through having experienced trauma, specifically trauma related to, sexual trauma, you know, and having that mark so many points of my life in my timeline. Um, and, making peace with like that has been a big part of like this human's experience here. Like that's been a really big part of my particular journey in this lifetime is experiencing sexual trauma and trauma in other forms, but specifically sexual trauma and the guilt and shame that seem to almost be embedded in the body. Also because sexual trauma is really, I would say, one of, if not the most challenging form of trauma to work with because of how we don't look at it, we can't acknowledge it. It's the one thing we never want to speak to or share with other people. And so living so long with that experience kind of embedded within you and not being able to speak to it or really be seen and held in it, it develops like alongside that trauma that's stored in the body. This whole shame guilt complex develops, and even though I've resolved, the PTSD and those trauma responses that I developed in response to the trauma, I did have this like kind of eager expectation that like, oh, I'm just going to clear all the guilt and shame, and I'm never going to, I won't have to deal with it anymore because I'm going to heal the trauma, and like, and also just recognizing that those are such prevalent wounds in our collective, and as long as they live in our collective, and as long as they live within the women of our collective, like we're going to meet those threads within ourselves. And so something that I'm still actively working on within myself is like making friends with my guilt and my shame. And I've made friends with most of my neuroses and trauma responses, but the guilt and the shame are the hardest one for me. It's the only texture that can really send me into like a spiral. And yeah, just giving myself permission to, I like what you said, Isis, about like you're still loving yourself and holding yourself and allowing yourself to feel all of those things, and maybe even to maintain patterns and behaviors that are not fully of service, but like still loving yourself in it while simultaneously holding a vision of how you want to be and how you want to show up for yourself. And I love that. I'm really at a place in my life where I don't shame any of my coping patterns or behaviors. I don't shame them. But I also try to keep in balance that deeper desire and intention in knowing that there's a way to be an even deeper right relationship. Um, but what I love about guilt and shame, one of the few things I can appreciate about guilt and shame is like I feel like it kind of like brings you to your knees a little bit. It's such a it's such a intense sensation to hold in the body, and it's really like it's really showed me what self-love is. Right? Because it's easy to love yourself if you feel really good about yourself and you don't feel particularly ashamed or guilty of anything, but to love yourself in a moment of feeling so cripplingly ashamed and so full of guilt is like so profound. And I also practice like loving the texture of the shame itself, and connecting to it as if it's, I don't know, some little creature or entity, that is like finding you and attaching to those places in you that reflect it, that hold the same resonance. And yeah, and just really also it's a tricky thing because we don't want to validate the story of the shame, which is, I did this or experienced this, therefore I'm fill in the blank. We don't want to validate the story, but I think to validate the sensation without the story, just that sensation of guilt or shame, and just to acknowledge, like, it's okay that I feel this. And if I'm feeling it, there's a reason. And I'm not going to gaslight my body and try to convince my body that it shouldn't feel this way. And can I just hold and acknowledge, like, I see that you feel this way. I see you. I acknowledge it. I honor it without validating the story. And that's the challenging part, but that's where I found the most support, is like separating the story of why I should feel ashamed from just the experience of shame. Because the truth is, shame is actually just a sensation, it's usually connected to trauma and unresolved charge in the body. But what we make of the shame in our minds is what can just destroy us. And maintaining that story, you know, it's whew. And I think it's something we just spiral even deeper and deeper into. You know, I used to want to get away from the shame, and now I'm like, wait, what if I could really, really get into it even deeper and actually form a relationship with it? And what I ask myself is like, what if the shame I feel never goes away? What if I live with this guilt and shame for the rest of my life? And how would I need to come into relationship with it so that it no longer was so painful for me? And that's one thing to think of in theory, and it's another thing to practice it. But yeah, just holding such a deep acknowledgement for my body that like you experienced things that like you didn't deserve that happened, and it's not good and it's not bad, it's what happened, it was the experience. There's no inherent wrong in it, but this is the truth of your body still holding threads of that. And you know, validating the body in that experience, that that's a perfectly normal and natural way to respond. And I think because trauma, especially things like sexual trauma, we can end up um, because of the shame of that experience, we can end up taking the shame into ourselves, right? That's a very common thing when we experience trauma, like um, to make ourselves somehow the recipient of the of like how big that charge is to hold, that we have to take it on ourselves and we have to take responsibility for it. And I think the responsibility is just responding to your body's experience of it. The responsibility is not like I did this somehow. I was like to blame for this, or I was, you know, I allowed myself to be a part of this, or I whatever it is, whatever story that we've created. The responsibility is literally the ability to respond to your body's experience of it. Mm, yeah. Thank you for speaking to that, Isis, and bringing that up in the space because it's actually been very alive for me in the past week, especially, and last night. Mm.
I just want to quickly say thank you so much. I feel so seen, and just my gratitude. I can't wait to go into it more, and really let myself feel, really feel. So thank you.
Mm, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your shares. They resonate so much with me, so deeply. Oh my goodness. And I feel like a lot of what's shared, even though it's not relating to what I'm experiencing this week, I know like it's almost like it's planted as seeds, like these conversations, and it's so helpful. I've already experienced it where I come back to just how somebody is processing or being in relationship to these parts of themselves. So thank you. Um, Thank you so much. I guess I'll share, but in a bit of a different, but still very human process. Um, yeah, I've been going through a challenge with a friend. I won't go into too much details with, but basically like a deep medicine sister that I've known for 8 or 9 years, like one of the closest, most deep, most powerful, most transformative relationships I've ever had. And a lot's changed kind of shockingly over the last year in many ways. And um, I was finally able to have a conversation with her and share some concerns, which was a good conversation. But what's really come to light is this deeper knowing. And the thing that I don't want to admit is my truth is I feel like our relationship is actually diverging. Like we're heading on different paths and our souls are being called into different processes, different initiations, different callings. And I think for so long I've been holding on just because there's so much love there. And I think I've also just gotten used to things in the relationship that were actually coming out of me, like fawning or people pleasing or suppressing my voice and wanting a strong leader in the room kind of thing. And it's just taken like a really dramatic event for me to be able to see, like, oh, I actually don't resonate in this space anymore. And it's been, yeah, it's been like truly one of like heartbreaking. And I haven't really gone into too many, I haven't really experienced romantic love yet. That's something that I look forward to, but this feels like one of my deepest heartbreaks that I've ever experienced before. And I'm about to bleed right now too. So I was tuning into my womb in that meditation and tuning into her emotions and really checking in with my intuition because I keep asking, like, is this really what I'm meant to be releasing right now? And my truest answer is yes. And then this whole world of self-doubt and concern and everything can come in, but I keep coming back to that thread of truth. And when I went into my womb, there was this part of me of like, it was just like shrieking practically of like, please no, let this not be the case. Like, just this immense level of grief. And last night I actually did the grief and rage ceremony, which was funny because or interesting, synchronistic perhaps, because the morning of it, when it was live, I just intuitively, my whole body was like, nope, nope. Um, and then yesterday when I did it, and I was picking up the different altar pieces, I didn't have a leaf, so for the one for grief, I picked this feather, which is a vulture feather, after I realized, which is symbol of death and transitions. Um, so I really got to cry and be in process with it and finding like I'm just going through this big process of um, ending the gaslighting I've done of myself. Because there's this part of me that is so able to, and like very proud that I can hold a lot of space and see the bigger picture and make room for multiple truths to exist. Like that is one of my values is what is truth? Let there be more than one version. But what I've done time and time again is I've overridden my own body's sense of intuition, my own sense of safety, my own voice. And over time, that turns me into a mute version of myself that's like, I'll love you, I'll hold space. And that's true. Like, I'll love you, I'll hold space. But there's just this deeper recognition of, but I'm not meant to hold everybody's process. Like, truly, I'm not meant to. Like, the most loving thing that I can do is to let people freely go on their own path, but also respect, love myself in that process, which means I'm not always a part of it. And yeah, I'm just like in the in between right now. Like, my intuition is to send her a message today that I'm clear and I'd like to have a conversation. But then another part of me is like, am I ready for that? Am I clear enough? Do I need to take more time? Because I'm relating to the girl I know who she is inside, like the love that we share. And if I'm to be honest with myself, I miss I miss the old her. Like, and I'm like, is this unevolved? That like I'm grieving like our old version of our relationship. Like I'm grieving her from a year ago, grieving her from 5 years ago. And if I'm to be honest with about our relationship and the energetic that she brings today, I'm like, I'm not grieving that. I'd say good riddance. Good riddance to that. Like, no, not in my space. I'm done with that energy. I'm done with all of that. So, yeah, it's just been a bit tricky. And also tricky because she's just navigating some really challenging things in her life right now and has recently lost some other relationships. I think, yeah, not mine to process, but I'm sure a big mirror for her to look at as well. And yeah, so I feel like I'm in the in-between of how much more do I want to suffer with the ripping off the band-aid, or how much time do I genuinely need to drop into clarity. There's also this concern because we've just gone through this really big emotional thing that she's been going through, that am I just making this out of fear, out of my own triggers, or out of, this heightened state, and this is my response. Um, but my intuition is that I needed something this dramatic as a mirror for me to actually get clear within myself. Because there has been so much of this gaslighting and so much of this self-gaslighting and minimizing. And then when I start to process with other people, not to make my friend wrong, but they're just very clearly like, yeah, like there's some outrageous, like for some people, they might perceive what's happening as outrageous. Whereas for me, I just got so used to it that it almost needed to get this intense for me to recognize. I'm like, I don't think I want to be here anymore with her. So, and then on the flip side of that, when I actually tune into what I think is happening in my life, is this big transition. Like last year, a year ago today, I got rid of my home, my car. I left my hometown. 8 months ago, I quit my full-time job, started traveling, and just falling into this next chapter. I still don't know how I'm gonna make money yet, like just part of this continual thing. Um, and now I just feel this like next shift coming into true sovereignty and like cutting ties with relationships that have been so powerful, but also ones that I've almost gotten lost in their drama for years and gotten lost in their process as a way to avoid my own like sovereign voice and my own sovereign becoming. And I get kind of excited. I am excited about what's in store and to come purely from like my own energetic and my own self-initiation process instead of getting confused by another person so frequently. So yeah, say it ain't so, spirit. Say it ain't so. Um, and I still have the asterisk. We'll see. I'll give myself a little bit more time. I'm so grateful how spirit provides because I'm house sitting right now and I'm literally on the ocean. If you can, might be too bright right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with this, look at this wrinkly man. If you can see him. The droopiest lips of all time, which I'm so grateful because I find when I go through big things, Spirit usually provides a dog for me, which is great. And the ocean is the most like soothing, resonant element for my soul. So I'm like, if I have to go through this, thank goodness I'm in paradise and supported. But yeah, that's my share. And just a quick note, I'll have to take the dog for a walk soon, so I might switch into headphones and just listen and receive during that point.
Mm, mm.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for sharing. Also relating so deeply to your shares, it's so interesting because I also am navigating this. I mean, it's something I've been navigating for years, and I'm just getting clearer and clearer and more refined in, this balance between showing up for those in your community and your family, that you love, and holding space for them and supporting and facilitating experiences within them while also navigating like my own boundaries with it. And yeah, years ago when I started doing this work, I really was still resistant to doing this work with like my family, for example. And then I kind of had this moment of like, okay, but to hold space is to hold space, right? And like that means also showing up in my like literal direct community and my family, and that was a really healing realization to feel that I could, in the same way I might be holding space for other people in spaces such as this, that I can do that for my family as well. And that was beautiful, and it brought me into deeper relationship with them. But I also have a habit of like getting carried away with things of that nature. Like if I'm gonna hold, especially with someone like a family member, right, who there's just so much time. I mean, there's so much deep stuff, right? Um, getting carried away and wanting and feeling like it's my responsibility to be the facilitator of the family healing, or whatever it is with a friend or whoever is, showing up. And there's this impulse to either, and this comes up especially, I think, with family and close friends. It's like either I need to be like, have nothing to do with it, or I need to be like a martyr for it. And yeah, just continuing to navigate. And I've just been on this journey of like pendulating a little bit, of like going deep into it and then being like, ooh, okay, this is actually not serving me anymore. And how can I withdraw? And because we had such a big experience this past month with my family and I, really getting to some deep things that we've never touched before, and them actually responding. And now I'm having like weekly conversations with my parents one-on-one and moving through some of these things. And I've been really excited about it. And I've been really like, okay, like it's time. They're ready. They're actually receiving me now. And really acknowledging maybe a little bit the space that I can hold for them. And then I had a dream last night, just in keeping with the whole intensity of last night. I had a dream that I was on the beach with my family, and there were these giant waves that were coming in, and we had all of our things, all of our belongings stretched along the beach, and the waves started coming in and washing our belongings away. And so we all started running and like gathering our stuff to try to bring back to shore. But the ocean just kept coming further and further. And it was like, just as we managed to kind of pull things out of the water, more things would be pulled away. And my mother or someone in my family was like yelling at me that like I wasn't getting enough things, and you're missing this and you're missing that. And but I had my hands full, and it kind of felt like I was the one who needed to get all of the stuff out of the ocean. And I was so stressed out. And I think it was after that dream, or around that time, that I woke up and was all, oh, and actually now just sharing that, it's like landing that stuff that I had in my body that I couldn't find in my body was maybe something in their family, in the family field. But I woke up kind of realizing like, oh, I've been really excited about supporting them, but I'm realizing on a deeper level there's some message that's coming up of just like warning me, gently warning me like, hey, this is just because you're excited about this and they're receiving you and we're starting to do this work doesn't mean you are the one who has to take care of it all. And if it doesn't go the way it should go, it's not your fault. Right. So just realizing that, like, and that was really beautiful to have that. And yeah, I'm still really, as someone who's deeply empathic and I mean, like, if I'm with you, I'm fucking with you and I feel you. It's like I'm still navigating the holding without taking it into my body. And I can do that with most people, but with my family, it's really challenging still. So there was just that message that came through of like, you know, just continue to be like aware of like how I'm navigating it and checking in with myself, and not going into the selfless martyr, syndrome that I sometimes have. Mm, because I'm still navigating my own things, right? Like we were just speaking to, I still have my own things to hold. And, you know, I think just because I might have moved through some things that my family is still in doesn't mean that like I need to then put myself on hold to like, it's almost like I recognized some years ago that like I had my boat tied to theirs. And so I could never, every time I was getting further out to sea on my journey, shifting into the space that I wanted to be in, I would kind of get held back because I was tied to their boat. Almost like the solidarity thing, feeling like you need to be in solidarity with those people you love most when they're suffering. Um, And I untied my boat, and I've been on that journey for a year or two now of like just being in my own boat. And now I'm feeling the temptation to retether myself. And it's just a really beautiful initiation to be like, how can I, because this is my family, like these are people I'm choosing to maintain connection with. How can I remain tethered or not tethered? How can I remain untethered while still holding space and serving them within my own capacity? And that's a journey. I'm still finding that and finding that balance within myself. Yeah. Alexandria, did you want to share anything? And I also just want to say, like with regard to friends and people who are maybe not direct family, like it isn't our responsibility to even maintain connections. I've had friendships and connections that I have fully walked away from simply because it was clear it like wasn't in our contract anymore. Like that there was something fulfilled in our contract, and to kind of stick around was just actually keeping us from moving forward and deepening into our own into our own path. Yeah. And Alexandria shares, the connection between my back and my womb space has felt important for me lately in relation to feeling safe in my body and field, as well as taking up more space. Also, I appreciate how Talitha described responsibility as the ability to respond to the body's experience of something. That feels really helpful for me. I want to ask how responsibility and accountability may differ. I feel curious of the difference because I feel like I've been trying to improve my relationship to both without shame, guilt, fear, overwhelm, etc. Yeah. For me, and this is just my personal kind of interpretation of it, responsibility is, and this is where I love the term, like the ability to respond, which is in the word. It is about, it's really just about like the response to ourselves, right? And being able to having the capacity, I feel like I should say, having the capacity to respond. And this is where like the guilt and shame of being quote unquote irresponsible can be really challenging, because when we're not able to be responsible around something, whether it's something in our life external to us or whether it's something within our own experience, that can obviously bring up this shame of like, oh, I'm not adult enough, or I'm not like, I don't have my shit together enough to be on top of this. But responsibility is an ability, which means it's capacity. And when we don't have the capacity to respond, we don't have the responsibility because literally that ability is not present. And so my journey with responsibility is someone actually who has always had like a resentment for responsibility, is someone who's always just been like, there's too much being asked, there's too much being expected, and really kind of trying to avoid it, has been realizing like, oh wow, this is about my capacity. And if I can really support myself in deepening my capacity to hold what I'm experiencing, to hold my life, and notice when I can't hold it, when I don't have the capacity, there's a reason. It's not because I suck, it's because there's a reason. And that's why a big part of my journey has been like tending to my nervous system and doing somatic work, and really, when I feel that I can't respond, immediately asking myself, okay, like where is my capacity challenged right now, and what can I do for myself to nourish and deepen my capacity? And I would say that responding within your capacity is responsible, right? It's like a responsible way to be with ourselves, which means not taking on responsibilities from others that is not really our responsibility, and being able to say no and walk away from responsibilities that are not inherently our own. Because when we overwhelm ourselves with responsibility, we overshoot our capacity. And to me, that's what's irresponsible to myself, is like taking on something I can't hold. This can also show up in like being responsible with those in our life who we love. You know, when someone comes to you with something they need to share, or something they need to ask, or something they need to offer, our ability to respond to them, which also still requires capacity, you know? So for me, I'm responsible to myself by nourishing my capacity. And when I nourish my capacity, then I can be responsible for others in my life. And for me, I just feel accountability is more something, um, hmm, accountability is something I think we can hold each other in, right? Holding each other accountable. Um, but I think there's also a responsibility there, because we need to be very clear about like what am I expecting others to be accountable for, and is that something they should be accountable for, or is it just something I want them to hold? But I believe very much in like some degree of community accountability, you know, and at least knowing that we're allowed to bring that up to one another, whether or not others want to receive that. Um, but yeah, I think accountability to me feels like acknowledging where I was not maybe in right relationship, where I was out of harmony, out of balance. And that for me, the accountable piece can be really tender, because it's so easy for me to feel guilty about doing the wrong thing, that's where I bring in the responsibility piece, because for me to be responsibly accountable means not guilt tripping myself. Because if I feel really guilty and ashamed for being held accountable, whether by from another person or from myself, I actually am completely what's the word? I'm almost sabotaging my capacity, because when you're in deep guilt and shame, your capacity just diminishes significantly. Like literally your nervous system capacity is severely affected by guilt and shame. So accountability is something I'm still like, I still walk with very gently, because I want to be responsible in the way I hold myself accountable, meaning I want to actually um, mm, have the capacity to hold that, as well as not run away with the story of it, if that makes sense. And I'm just curious if anyone else has their own thoughts or reflections on that kind of, yeah, the differentiation between responsibility and accountability. Mm. Also, welcome, Leanne. Oh no, this must be Leanne. Oh, this must be the same Leanne who's walking her dog. Okay, we have two Leannes, right? So it's like so many Leannes. uh, hmm.
I used to deeply, deeply, deeply hate responsibility. And I think it stemmed from my mother. It was like a whole legal thing, but I always say she was taken away from me when I was like 5. So it was me, my little sister, and my father, who honestly was an alcoholic. So it just like immediately I became this responsible person. Like I had to be so young. And I've learned now that I deeply am trying to change my relationship with responsibility. I was in such resistance of it, and I didn't realize like how much that is like on a collective level. It sucks. It sucks to be that person. It's like to be honest. It's just, I didn't realize I was doing harm to other people by not being responsible as well. I thought it was just my own. So I just, but then I understood more and I grew like the capacity to realize that it's not just about me, it's bigger than that. But I see like how all of this is really tied together. And I don't know why I didn't really put that two and two together, that responsibility and the guilt and the shame. And I hope this part it will be in the re-recordings. I would love to re-listen to what you said because it was like I knew it was so nourishing for me, but for some reason I was like a little bit off in taking in the information. But even if it's not, I just want to say I guess that was I had this really bad relationship with responsibility. I used to despise it. And little by little, I'm creating the capacity, I guess, to hold responsibility in all different forms.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and I think the painful thing is that typically when people are irresponsible in our society, we project onto them that they don't care, that they're lazy, and that they're selfish. And what I, how I typically understand that presentation of like avoiding responsibility, a lot of the time I think it's a trauma response. Because when you do not, your nervous system is challenged, right? And you're holding a lot of trauma in your body, you can't respond if your nervous system is in a trauma active state, right? So just recognizing that like there is something deeply intelligent and self-preserving about that desire to avoid responsibility. And when we come at it from this place of like, well, you just need to, put your big girl pants on and be responsible, we can kind of bypass the biological truth that like the body is actually maybe not able to literally respond in that way. And we can still hold ourselves accountable in the sense that we can acknowledge like, wow, I didn't really show up to that. I didn't show up to that, and that was not in right relationship, and that was not in harmony, and maybe it affected this person or this person, but taking accountability in the sense of acknowledging where you were out of right relationship and acknowledging where you can shift to be in deeper right relationship, right? And where we desire to kind of move. But if we're not including a deep acknowledgement of our capacity, to me, it's like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. To be like, I take accountability for not being responsible, for not showing up, and I'm going to do better. But I'm not actually going to acknowledge the deeper biological truth that's arising here, which is that I have a lot of maybe unresolved trauma, or I'm still in a space where I can't even hold myself. To not acknowledge that is to just, that's the shame circle. The shame circle is, it's all my fault, I'm so bad, and I should just do better, without any like practical supportive perspective. And sometimes when we're held accountable, it can be painful, and I think that's okay. And I think someone who, like when we're really in right relationship and community, we're able to hold someone accountable and bring something to them, and also allow their feelings of shame and guilt and whatever is going to arise, right? Like that to me is like truly being in right relationship, to say like, hey, I need to hold you accountable for this. I would need you to acknowledge this. And if it's really painful for you and you feel really ashamed and it's really hard, like I'm also willing and understanding of you and having that experience, because what I'm actually interested in is right relationship. What I'm not interested in is you performing to my standard at all costs to your own well-being, right? So there's this is where we really need to be like compassionate with one another, to hold others responsible and accountable without forgetting their humanity and the context of the experience they're in. Yeah, it's a very delicate thing. And yeah, I know for me, as someone who's avoided responsibility, I have a story that it's hard for me, and it's very easy for me to get overwhelmed when I reach my limit. And then it's very easy for me to compare and be like, there must just, like, I must have a defect. This is so hard for me, but in truth, I have every right in the world to have that experience. And that's what forgiveness is. The etymology of forgiveness is to allow. It's understanding that you have every right in the world to be as you are, to have done as you have done. We can be accountable for what we have done and still forgive it. And when we forgive it, we liberate ourselves from the shame of it. And when we liberate ourselves from the shame of it, we actually have all of this capacity and energy to suddenly be responsible. So it's such a tricky thing with shame, because the second we ask others to change or do better with the texture of shame present, we actually incapacitate them, because shame is deeply disabilitating, right? It debilitates us. And also like allowing that, like, we fuck up. That's what we do. We fuck up. We're not always perfect, and sometimes we don't do the right thing. We don't show up for someone, and that's like a practice that I'm learning, is like allowing myself to like fuck up, and allowing myself to like, oh, can I like accept that I'm not always going to do it right, and I'm not always going to show up in all the right ways, and to surround myself with people who can love me in that while holding me accountable without ever shaming me, and that means I have a standard of people that I really want to be in relationship with. And then I try to also show up in that way for myself. Hmm. Hmm. Is there anything else anyone has on their heart to share, to speak? Hmm. I'm just thinking right now of like how this relates to my relationship with my womb specifically, and like how I'm like, I have to eat the perfect diet of like high protein, high fat, and like really nourish my reproductive health. But I also need to do my movement, that is supportive to my pelvis and to my pelvic bowl, and I also need to get all my sleep, and I also need to be aligned with my cycle and not, and how that is like a fucking massive responsibility that most of us as women cannot hold, because nobody taught us. Nobody taught us. And when I look at the areas of my life that I'm still desiring in relationship to my womb to show up more and really support her, and have more established patterns and habits and, embodied ways of being, what I try to ask myself is like, okay, so if I'm not actually showing up in this way, whether it's like, maybe not being on top of my sleep or my diet, or maybe like not actually spending that focused time with my womb and really listening to my body, what I ask myself first is like, what right now is limiting my capacity to do this thing? Right. So right now I'm trying to eat, I'm trying to eat more protein. This is my current thing. Like really hard for me to like freaking eat all the time. I'm like been out of my body my whole life. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to eat. Like, so I'm trying to eat more protein. I'm trying to eat more fat. I'm trying to really nourish my body, because I know that when I do, my hormonal health, my menstrual health, my ovulation, it's so healthy and robust. But what I have to like remind myself is, when I can't do that, is like, what in my life is limiting my capacity to fill in the blank, to feed myself, rather than be like, I just need to figure out the perfect hack. I need to figure out the perfect way, figure it out. How can I figure out how to eat perfectly and get what I need, and just address it from up here? And I've just kind of been trying to like stop that pattern altogether and just ask what in my life is like keeping me from doing that, because there's something in my life, there's a level of overwhelm or busyness or fullness that is limiting my capacity to show up in that way. And so that's a practice I really encourage. Like if you notice there's some way you want to show up for yourself more, like get really specific about it and then ask yourself, and this could be a beautiful journaling type of thing, like what in my life, in my experience, is limiting my capacity for this. And then we might want to immediately fix the thing, like, oh, I'm so busy, I need to stop being busy. But that's also not fully helpful, because maybe there are things in your life that you can't immediately change. Maybe that's what your life is about right now. And so the question is now, how can I support my capacity if I do need to have this level of busyness or fullness or this responsibility in my life that's affecting my capacity to show up in other ways? What can I do to start kind of balancing, right? Whether that is like a somatic practice, whether that is a meditation or a self-touch practice where you can give yourself what you need to replenish. And this is also getting like knowing yourself and knowing the things that just fill you, knowing those things that just replenish you on a deep level and prioritizing it. And also knowing that this is such a slow journey of like slowly increasing our capacity in all these different ways. And it takes time. And when we have frustration or even fear around not showing up in the ways we should, like, oh, this is not good for my body, or I need to do better, that in itself can actually deeply affect our physical health. In truth, that can affect our nervous system. Whenever you tell yourself you're doing something wrong, you're not doing enough, that affects your nervous system. So the other practice is like, how can I be aware of what I want to be showing, how I want to be showing up without making myself wrong for not doing it? And kind of learn to, when those thoughts come up of like, oh, I should be fill in the blank, be like, oh, beautiful. Thank you for that reminder. I'll write it down, stick it up somewhere, and I'll work on it slowly. But the reaction itself of fear, of wrongdoing, of not enoughness can really actually be the thing that then gets our capacity down and limits our capacity again. Oh, it's such a it's like such a mind fuck. Oh, and just acknowledging that like we all hold, like we're all moving through this, we're all navigating this, you know, and stop freaking comparing ourselves to people we barely know who we think have it all down and doing it all perfect, and we're just doing like throwing that out, because we're all holding this in some degree. We all have some way that we're working through this. So I think we're going to take a little break for tea, snacks, dancing, bathroom, whatever you need to do. Looking at your clock now, coming back in 10 minutes, and then we're going to get into the vocal part of this ceremony. So yeah, coming back in 10 minutes.